Friends, good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you so much for being here in person. We have about 150 people who are watching on our live stream, so I just want to say hello to everyone watching on live stream, and we know that lots of people will watch after the fact when we post this to our website. It's wonderful to welcome you to another one of our conversations here at the National Opera Center. I'm Marc Scorca. I'm the president of OPERA America. And these conversations give us a chance to hear from some of the most outstanding singers of our day and to learn a little bit about how they built their careers, how they sustained their careers, and maybe even a little bit of advice for the young people who may be aspiring for careers in opera and want to hear from the experienced artists. So it really is a pleasure to be here with you tonight and to get to know Samantha Hankey. I first heard her when she was finishing up at Juilliard in Handel, and then this past summer hearing her in Debussy, at Santa Fe Opera, last winter in Strauss at the Metropolitan Opera. We're about to hear her in Gounod at the Metropolitan Opera. If you think of the 4 roles, 2 are pants roles, we'll talk a little bit about that, and a lot more. So please join me in welcoming the wonderful mezzo-soprano, Samantha Hankey.
Thank you so much.
So happy to have you here. Thank you, thank you. Romeo and Juliet hasn't opened yet, has it?
No.
When does it open?
We open on the 7th.
So rehearsal's going well?
It is, yeah.
Good, good. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
If you've seen any of my interviews, you know I always start with the question of who brought you to your first opera?
It's complicated. My first opera technically was while I was a student in high school. I was already a voice major, and I went to see Aina Damar by Goliov, and my voice teacher was in the chorus. And that was my first experience of opera.
And that was where?
That was at Boston, or Opera Boston.
Opera Boston, okay.
Yes.
How wonderful. And you say you were already majoring in voice, but you said high school.
Yes.
And rarely is a high school student majoring in voice. You know, the opera voice takes a while to be discovered, as we learned.
For sure.
But there you were as a high schooler, and I know from your biography that you started singing actually at 6. So what about this singing thing came so early to you?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't singing at 6 years old. It was, one of those things that my mom put me in to see how do I do with that? Is it something I'm interested in? And I loved it. And I said to my mom, can I please keep doing this? I was just in the chorus, and she found a way to get me in voice lessons. And it just took off from there. I loved it.
And by high school, you were taking it more seriously.
Yes.
Who's the first person who said to you, Samantha, you have a gift?
I think I was really lucky that a lot of people said that before it was actually really clear. I don't know what's the perfect equation that makes a great teacher, but I know one of the essential elements is being able to see at least the drive and the passion in young people. And I was very fortunate that a number of teachers saw that in me and supported me and led me to being here.
So in high school, what you had identified, or they had identified you as a mezzo-soprano in high school? No. What was happening?
So I started out in high school, and I was just this straight-toning soprano, and I went off to the Boston University of Tanglewood Institute, and I worked with a mezzo-soprano. She gave me one of the Cherubino arias, and after that, something changed. I think working with a mezzo, I think I definitely went through a kind of vocal shift. I know we only talk about men having that kind of change, but I definitely went through something, and that's when I was a mezzo.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm so fascinated. I don't know how many people are aware of the NPR program called From the Top. And it is one of my favorite programs where they identify really, really promising, generally high school students, and interview them, and the students play something virtuosic at some age of 16 or 17 or 18, and they're pianists or playing the violin or the flute or something. And then there's an interview, and even though they've been virtuosic on their instrument, you realize how young they are when they start doing the interview, and it's kind of endearing. You were on From the Top, and I don't think I've ever heard a singer featured on From the Top.
Oh, wow.
Because in high school, how many singers are ready to be on National Public Radio making music? How did this come about?
I think because I was at Performing Arts High School, there were already a lot of fellow musicians who had been on the show. Because we did pre-college training at New England Conservatory, it was always on the radar. Of course, it wasn't very common for singers, but I was always on the lookout for different competitions. I always had a lot of financial need, and there was the element of the Jack Kent Cooke Award, which I was very fortunate to receive that as well. And I got lucky and I was on the show.
What did you sing?
I actually sang Stefano's aria.
Really? Did you? Really?
So if you want the contrast of what I sounded like at 17 and then come to the show on the 7th.
That is so funny. And I haven't had a chance to do, if I went online, could I find it?
You could, and it's very different from how I sound now.
I'm sure of that. And does the interview amuse you when you hear the interview portion?
I haven't had the guts to listen to the interview again.
I would not want to hear an
Yeah.
interview with me at 17 either.
No.
But what an extraordinary experience that
It was. It was.
And again, pointing you in the direction of a career as a singer.
For sure.
Where did you go to college conservatory?
I did both my undergrad and my master's at Juilliard.
Okay, and so packing it up and coming down to New York from the Boston area, and a good experience for you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I love New York.
How wonderful. And then competitions. You already mentioned how important they are.
Yes.
And the list is tremendous. I mean, Met Opera National Council, Operalia, Birgit Nilsson Prize, Dallas Vocal Competition. It's fantastic. And you've said it, that for young singers, it's an extraordinarily expensive career to train in, and these prizes help. But they must do a lot more than that. What is winning these prizes do to you as a singer?
I think that competitions are both financial and a performance opportunity. So for young artists, it's an incredible way to sing for a large scale of people, a large new audience for the first time. And it's a very efficient way of auditioning because there's usually a lot of different opera company casting directors on board. Everyone in the industry moves around at some point, and so it was a great way to have a lot of people hear me and to support the singing, the studying, my student loans.
I've never thought about it quite that way. You know, in addition to giving you just the confidence and the evidence that
For sure.
I should be doing this.
For sure.
The fact that for a lot of these important competitions, there are a number of people who are there listening to them, or who read about who the winners
Exactly.
are. So it really does help get their career going.
Yeah, but I think for young singers, it's really important to treat it like a snowball effect and not just start out with the big ones out the get-go. So I did a number of competitions in high school, and then I took a large, break from them. I focused on my singing, my studies at Juilliard, and then I re-emerged into them when I felt like my voice had changed enough. My technique had solidified, and I felt ready to try and emerge again.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly in front of that kind of audience, if you will, of people who hire or people who will talk about it, the stakes are high to come out and sing that one aria.
Yes.
Did you have a couple of audition pieces for those competitions that were your sort of signature audition pieces?
Yes. The repertoire really shifted around, though. I liked to think about competitions and collect as much data from the competitions as I could. I thought about them very strategically, and so I would say, all right, this is the repertoire that I have, and I would look at the history of different competitions, and I would say, okay, they tend towards flashy arias. Sopranos usually do very well, so I would bring out Una voce poco fa. I'd bring out the brighter things that I had in my repertoire. If they liked the heavier, the darker, the meatier repertoire, that's what I would put on there. It would be Berlioz, it would be Strauss. And it's not that I was necessarily changing who I am, but I was seeing how I could better fit the profile of the artist for the competition. in order to gain their support.
You really were strategic about it. Because I know there are singers who think that carefully about it, to do the research, to understand what has succeeded in this setting, and if it is within the scope of your repertoire, to put that on stage.
For sure. Even looking back and seeing, okay, what do people wear? What do I have in my wardrobe that matches the aesthetic of this competition? I mean, I was very detailed when I went to competitions.
Wow. You know, when you're done with singing, you can become a corporate CEO. That's just absolutely fabulous. Talk to me about young artist programs.
I didn't really do many of them. I think that they're an amazing opportunity, but I really wanted to just sink my teeth into work. And I was very lucky that I had the opportunity to do that. Some of the training programs I did do were the Marilla Opera Program, Opera Theater of St. Louis, Aspen Music Festival.
Okay.
But these were all during my years at Juilliard. They were during the summers.
And I thank you, because I was trying to, as I researched this and was trying to make a chronology of when I'd seen you at Juilliard, and yet you were doing these programs, and I thought, well, when did they happen? So it was sort of concurrent.
Yes, the last program I did was Marilla, and that was right after I finished my master's. And I went there specifically to sing the role of Cenerentola, because then I had my first professional contract, which was Rosina in Il Barbiere di Siviglia, and I thought, what better way to get into the Rossini mindset than doing this in a safe space.
Sure. We're going to get to repertoire in a moment, because I'm fascinated by all the different things you're singing. Here you're talking about Una voce poco fa, and we're talking about Melisande and Octavian. So we'll talk about repertoire in a minute. But many of the company debuts that you're making right now are also role debuts.
Yes.
So how do you approach a role for the first time?
It depends on the role. Something like Stefano is a really exciting opportunity because it's an aria that I sang 14 years ago. So I get to go back to it and brush off the rhythms, the diction, approach it with my new big girl voice. But it's, in comparison to Melisande, to Octavian, a very small role. And so it's given me the opportunity to focus on some new technique, some new skills, the sword fighting, for example. Which is a real luxury, because when you're preparing a long role like Melisande, you just have to sit down and work out the rhythms, work out the notes, finesse the language in a much larger scale. So it all depends on the role, I would say.
Sure, I can imagine. And you just mentioned Melisande and Octavian, both of which are just such long roles.
Yes.
And for us mere mortals, I don't know how we would ever think about learning it. Do you start with the language to get the words down so the words can remind you? Do you start musically to get the music in your body and then start thinking about the words? Those are huge roles. How do you get them in you?
I don't let myself sing them until I fully translated the score.
Okay.
I think that that's like my reward for doing all of the work that I don't love doing. I don't love sitting at a desk and writing. I want to be in a room making music with other people and experimenting with sounds and colors. So I think the most tedious thing is the research aspect, preparing the score, making sure that it has the usual colors and tabs, and of course the language. But with the Romance languages, I don't need to spend as much time with the pronunciation as I would like Czech, which is what I'm working on right now, and it's humbling.
Yeah, and beautiful when you get it.
It's so beautiful, but it's really humbling because it's just so much time sitting there speaking in rhythm, listening back to the recorder. How do I need to fix this vowel? And then eventually, the notes will all come, but that's the easiest part.
So you don't want to start singing it until you really know what you're singing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the basis of what we do.
Sure. When is a role ready for you? How do you know, okay, I can leave the living room and sing this in the studio or on stage?
I think sometimes it feels that way, like the second week of rehearsal.
By the last performance, I think
Actually, the last performance is always the best. When people say they're coming to opening night, no, come to the last one. It's the most fun, we're relaxed, it's in our bodies. But no, I mean, usually it feels great for the first few days of rehearsal. But you really start sinking your teeth into it after a couple of weeks of rehearsal. Then you start finding, okay, these are the vocal things that I do when I'm having this challenge physically in the staging. This is the dynamic I have with this person who's not just a character on the page or notes being played and sung by the repetiteur. So it's also very dependent on who your colleagues are.
Yeah, wow. Now, let's talk repertoire, because you have sung so many different things. And is it that you want your career to be that varied, or are you just experimenting to feel what the Fach is that is yours? How are you, as again, just the roles I've listed so far, and you adding to them Cenerentola or Rosina, so that's coloratura, not Octavian.
Yes.
They're all so different. So what are you thinking now about repertoire?
It's a complicated question. I haven't sung Rosina or Cenerentola in years. I tried them out, and while I love the music, I thought there are too many things that happen throughout the course of an evening that I'm not happy with. And I know there are singers who do this music excellently. It's what they excel at, and I'm going to leave it for them. Because I need to go home at night and feel like I did a good job. And if there are too many little things that happen on stage vocally, that I'm not pleased with, I'm not going to feel good, and I need to feel confident on stage. I think a certain amount of the repertoire is experimenting. It's what casting directors think is right for me, and saying, okay, in 2 years, I think that that's the right opportunity for me. And a lot of it is flexibility. I want to be able to sing roles that I'm called to. And I think for a lot of people, it's confusing. I don't exactly know what my Fach is. I don't love the labels or the boxes, but I just want to sing what I'm called to. Absolutely. And at this point in your youthful career, experimenting seems just like the right thing to do. For sure.
To find it.
I think it's very healthy as well for the voice.
How about new works? Because I noticed in the repertoire list that you also, a lot of the inherited repertoire, but some new work as well. And does that speak to you in a different way? Do you prepare for it differently? Do you approach it differently?
It has its unique challenges, of course, because there aren't necessarily recordings to reference. There's the element of working with a composer, which can be wonderful. And I do wish that I had more opportunities for new music, because it's fun. It's nice.
And sometimes hard to sing, but...
Yeah, but also Strauss is hard to sing. So when you actually are in the room with a composer and you say, actually, F isn't the perfect note for me. It's in my lower passaggio. Could we take this up, to a D that's also in the chord? Can I sing a different note where I'm going to really have the project? Sure, change it. I can't do that with Strauss or Gounod.
And who knows, if Gounod were sitting there, he might have said, sure, do it. But,
Exactly.
one doesn't feel that you can take the liberty doing that. With all of the debuts you've made, it's been in Metropolitan Opera and other major houses. And they've been in Europe and in different countries in Europe. Do you find that different countries, different regions of the world approach rehearsal and performance differently? Or is there kind of a universal standard of professionalism?
Yes and no. I mean, we show up, we all have the music learned, we put it together, we go on stage, we make magic. But there's, of course, different degrees of how much time do we have, the language barrier, of course. I think, actually, this Romeo and Juliet process has been one of the shorter ones that I've had here in New York. But I think in Europe, it's often that we rehearse things for 5 days, and then we're on stage in front of the audience.
Really, that short? Because sometimes you hear that rehearsal periods in Europe can go on for weeks and weeks and just
sometimes for
aren't
new
very
productions.
efficient in the way they
Yes.
use their time.
But when I made my house debut at the Bayerische Staatsoper as an ensemble member, we had 5 days of rehearsal for Hänsel und Gretel. And the first time I performed on stage with the set, in costume, with the orchestra, was the performance. And so you're navigating all these things in real time with thousands of people watching you. It's pretty common. It's just a more efficient way of putting opera together, but it doesn't have the same, I think, nuance. At least I love feeling really well rehearsed, like I can predict what my colleagues will do, and having a bit of a rapport with them. And when things are put together so quickly, you don't necessarily have the time together to anticipate their moves or what they're going to do under pressure.
Or to have the confidence that they've got your back if something
goes
wrong.
Exactly.
So you mentioned the ensemble in Munich. So were you there for a season in Munich?
I was there for two seasons.
And tell us about what it means to say I was part of the ensemble. You had a lot of different roles within those 2 years.
Well, I mean, first off, it's a huge honor to be an ensemble member, especially in Munich. Especially in Munich. But unfortunately, my 2 seasons were during COVID. So I moved there in November of 2019, and then lockdown happened. But the great benefit was that I had a lot of time at home to just sit there with my Rosenkavalier score. And the theater actually never fully shut down, so I was able to go in, have coachings, work on the language, work on the music, and then we did one performance for live stream in 2021.
So when you were studying Rosenkavalier there, did you have a contract to do it, or were you just preparing for what you knew might be down the road?
They had discussed with me at some point that would be part of my second season.
Do you ever spend time looking at working on roles that are not contracts yet, but you know you want to see what they're like?
For sure.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, what fun. What fun. I won't ask you which ones.
I won't share them either. People would lose their minds.
Okay. There's a reception afterwards, so you've got a task here. So pants roles.
Yes.
And is it just the fate of a mezzo-soprano that you're going to play a lot of boys and men?
I don't think so. I think it depends really on your voice. I think there are lots of mezzos who would never sing a pants role. They get to sing all the meaty Verdi roles. And I think while the industry is making really huge efforts for inclusivity, I think that there's still a lot of room to grow, to have more different variety of bodies on stage. And unfortunately with pants roles, I don't see that same kind of representation. Yep,
it's so true.
Yeah.
Is it challenging? Because, I mean, if you think of Rosenkavalier, the number of times you are otherwise disguised, that you are a woman playing a man who's then playing a woman. And is it difficult to embody the gender roles when they're boys or men?
I don't think so. I mean, luckily I have a lot of practice with it now. I think it's actually some of the female roles that I struggle with. Yeah, I know that's shocking, right?
Interesting.
When I was singing Melisande this past summer, I had a great conversation with the director, Nisha Jones. And she kept saying, just have normal hands. Because as pants roles, I think a lot about my hands, so they look a little bit more masculine. And then I was trying to have my hands be more dainty, because Pellias and Goulot keep talking about how she has such little hands. And I thought, I don't have such little hands. So I tried making them smaller, and she said, just have normal hands. But I was trying to do what I think the audience was expecting of me. I was trying to fit into their expectations. And I do that a lot, I think, in female roles.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't necessarily feel like very feminine. I know, but I've always been very much a tomboy, so I think the pants roles are a little bit more comfortable for me.
Interesting. And of course they are completely pretend, and it might be easy to throw yourself into them just because they are so pretend.
But they're great. Yeah. They're really empowering, they're fun. There's a level of freedom in a pants role that you don't necessarily have as a female. I mean, just naturally men get to take up a certain amount of room that women don't necessarily take.
Yeah. So a pants roll coming up in Romeo and Juliet, but it's an HD transmission. It's a big audience. And I'm wondering in your training whether working with a camera, preparing you to be telecast or live streamed, was a part of your training at all?
Not that I recall. We definitely had discussions about interviews, but no one ever brought a videotape to class to work on that. I think it's just another level of performance.
Have you done a live stream or a film capture before?
Only at the Met.
Okay. So is there any difference in the way you conduct the performance, in the way you deliver the performance, knowing that there are cameras watching you?
I think when I was starting out and singing comprimario roles at the Met, I didn't think about it. I just gave the same kind of performance. There's 3,000-4,000 people in the house, so it's the same as usual. But it was actually the live stream that we did in Munich of Rosenkavalier, where it was to a completely empty house because of COVID, and everyone was tuning in virtually. And that was, I think, the thing that clicked for me, where it was, I'm performing for people at home. So I know that there's a microphone on me. I can treat this more like a recording studio. I need to think about things more as a film than necessarily an opera, if that makes sense.
It really does, especially if there's no audience, and that you are not necessarily filling the house with sound the way you're containing it for the what might be the microphone or the camera.
Right.
Are you so you did that, and then you're back in the theater with a live audience and a camera. Has it adjusted the way you blend those two?
I think slightly. I do think that whatever I prioritize for the camera will still read for the house. But the lighting, they changed the lighting a bit. And I want to make sure that whatever I'm doing is detailed enough that it's not going to be outrageous on camera, but it also is still going to have the right physical presence for the space. It's a fine line.
Yeah, it really is, because to read physically in a 4,000-seat theater requires a certain exaggeration, if you will, but the camera would pick that up as kind of weird.
Yeah.
So you have to walk that line.
And we don't usually perform in such huge spaces.
Right.
I mean, I'm coming from performing just recently in Zurich, which is a beautiful little jewel box of a theater. It's maybe 1,200 seats. And when we had our Sitzprobe on the Met stage earlier this week, I mean, just outrageous how huge it is. And the adjustment acoustically. And okay, I can't sing to the wings at all. I have to fully make sure that I'm directing my sound to the house.
Right.
So this goes hand in hand, I think, with the video.
Very interesting, very interesting. And, you know, I didn't ask you in advance. Here you're mentioning Zurich and Munich and other international locations. As an artist now making a name and a reputation for herself, a good year will have you traveling around the world. How are you living with the travel and waking up and wondering, now, what city am I in? How is that for you? How are you managing that?
That is like the spot-on question, because I can't tell you how many times I wake up in the middle of the night and I have no idea where I am.
Yeah.
You know, when you stay at a hotel and you don't know where the bathroom is, I mean, that's constant. So, you know, I am incredibly lucky that I travel with my husband. We have a pretty good status on United. So we're allowed, you know, 2 70-pound bags each, and we just take everything with us. I mean, it is truly living out of suitcases. But it's amazing, you know. I get to do what I love. I get to travel to amazing places, experience different cultures and foods. So it's a small price to pay.
Yeah. And for some people, I mean, you're fortunate that you have a husband who can travel with you, because it can be lonely, you know, on the road in those hotels.
We did long distance for years. It was very lonely.
Yeah.
It feels like your personal life is on pause and your professional life is advancing, and it's hard to balance the two.
For sure.
So.
Well, good that you're handling that so well. Recital work. So I notice in the schedule of activities that you do recitals, and not every opera singer feels comfortable on the recital stage or feels that somehow it adds a dimension. How do recitals figure in what you do and how you grow as an artist?
They're different, for sure. And it took a while for me to start feeling comfortable with them. They're very exposed, and I think the difference that I find with recitals is the audience watches you and everything is you. Mm-hmm. The interpretation is a reflection of who I am. Mm-hmm. Whereas when I'm dressed up in a costume and I'm playing a character, there's a little separation. There's the element, okay, the director told her what to do. The conductor told her what to do. The costumer and the hair and makeup team made her look that way. So it's not all of the responsibility on you as an individual. Mm-hmm. Recital work is the complete opposite, and you get to take control of the entire situation. You know, within reason, whatever the venue will let you do.
You choose the program from
yes,
from that,
sure.
A reflection of you.
For sure, and I think it took me a while to build the confidence to program exactly what it is that I wanted to program, mm-hmm. instead of trying to give the audience right. what the audience would like, what's right. easy listening, you know.
Or the Schubert. Academic program that has,
For sure.
every language and every...
But why? Why do we need that? Is that really a well-rounded, delicious evening? Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if it is.
Yeah, and that autonomy where you're deciding what you wear, mm-hmm. and you're deciding if your hand moves that way or not, as opposed to a stage director.
For sure.
So yeah, it's all you.
It is, but it's also equally fun and fulfilling.
Do you try to work those into your schedule with some regularity?
I try. It's not as easy. I think that I'm more in demand for operatic work, and mm-hmm. that is this kind of like self-fulfilling prophecy that sure. opera work builds more opera work, but I would love to do more recital work and concerts.
Duly noted. Duly noted. So, role models. Is there someone you know who knows that they may be a role model? Do you imagine conversations with people you don't know about role model? Who are some role models for you?
Some of the big ones. One of was Jesse Norman, mm-hmm. who I actually had the wonderful surprise of meeting at an airport. And I completely lost it. I mean, you don't picture meeting your role model at the airport, waiting to board a flight.
Was it coincidental?
It was.
Oh,
we
my goodness.
Both on the same flight to San Francisco.
Wow.
And I just had to go up and say hi, and she was, of course, wonderful and gracious and kind. And
what about her? The repertoire, the musicianship?
I think initially it was the instrument. Mm-hmm. There was something about her voice that called to me that had this kind of power, this pain, but also this not harshness, but a strength to it. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't necessarily that I was listening to her in opera, but I just immediately was drawn to her instrument. Mm-hmm. And I thought, okay, it was while I was in high school, listening to Jesse Norman, listening to Prokofiev, and just, these are the things that got me really excited about classical music.
Wow. So Jesse Norman is one.
Jesse Norman's one, and I think in a similar line as Jesse Norman would be Tatiana Troyanos. Mm. And these are two artists who also didn't necessarily fit into a fach. Mm-hmm. That's part of what I think is really inspiring about these women is they sang what fit their voices and what artistically spoke to them. Mm-hmm. So
very true in both cases.
Yeah.
That they really had broad repertoire, and in Jesse Norman's case, was it a mezzo-soprano? Was it a contralto? Was it a soprano? Yeah. She made it work.
Yeah,
it's so true.
For sure.
So even though you are just starting your career in a brilliant way. Thanks. Young singers must approach you to ask for advice. Mm-hmm. If you are going into the Juilliard bookstore, they probably advice. What do you offer younger people as advice these days?
I think it's pretty individualized, especially if I'm working with a young singer in a master class or on a one-on-one kind of setting.
You're doing master classes?
I have been asked to do a few.
We'll talk about that in a second.
They're very fun. But, I got this advice when I was a student, and I really hated it at the time. And it made me very angry. And the teacher had said to the class, if you can picture doing anything else, go do that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, being in this career, I understand entirely where that advice was coming from. It was coming from a place of love, because work aside, all jobs are hard. Anything worthwhile is hard. But there's a certain level, I think, with being a performer, with being an artist, and especially a freelance artist. Each path is unique. There's no exact formula for success. And it is hard, especially seeing the state of arts in America. And that's something that I worry about. I worry about it for myself, and I worry about it for the younger generation. And I see so many classmates who had incredible instruments, and I can't tell you why they're not performing or why they're not singing. There's no rhyme or reason to this. And so I think try and have as well-rounded an education as you can, focus both on business as the arts, have a backup plan, and if you can picture doing something else, maybe look into it, because it's just not an easy career. It's not.
And you hear advice givers say that, which is unless you are absolutely determined to try this, do something else.
Yeah. And I know personally, I could never picture anything else in my life. This is what I've had to do. I needed this, truly. So I think that's why it really rubbed me in the wrong way. And maybe some of my classmates had heard that and understood where it was coming from. But now seeing it, I understand.
Master classes, you're giving master classes. How does it feel so soon after being a student? You just were in your graduation and giving a master class. Do you learn from them yourself?
For sure. I think, of course, they're very unique. I was advised to go in and have a couple of things being prepared to talk about. I haven't mastered that yet. I want to work with a singer one-on-one and really just get into what it is that I hear. I think that I have a unique insight, just being very close in age to a lot of young singers, and to be pretty new in my career. I mean, I graduated in 2017, so I don't think things have changed that much. Of course, we all went through a pandemic, and the landscape has shifted, but I have a more recent experience with being a graduate.
What do you learn from them? When you're giving the master class and you come away having learned something, what is it you learn?
I think patience, which I'm not patient at all. But I think just this kind of forgiveness and understanding, okay, it's a long process, and things won't click overnight.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So where is home? When you have downtime, where do you spend it?
I kind of spend it all over the place. I have family in Florida. I have family in California. I don't have that much downtime. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Waking up confused in the middle of the night.
Well, I hope you get some down. I hope you are so popular that you get to demand downtime and get it. Yeah.
But I also have to be able to say no. And I love working, and I don't want to say no.
Yeah.
So.
Wow.
It's also
important
my own
lesson
fault.
to learn. Before we break, I just wanted to turn to friends in the audience to see if there are any questions that you'd like to ask. Please stand up, tell us your name, and ask your question.
Hi, my name is Jeremy. I'm kind of an opera student, part-time professional at it at this point. When it comes to saying no to a gig, how do you decide which one you say no to? Because I just finished a concert series. There were 4 performances in a week, and then, my church director calls me and says, I need you to do a funeral tomorrow morning. How do you say no to income?
So a good question, just for the live stream, I'll repeat it, which is about saying no, and how do you, know when to say no, and then how do you say no?
First off, if you're working with someone like a manager or an agent, of course it helps having one degree of separation. Of course, there's the physical limitation of what you can do, so people need to take that into account. You can't do everything, you can't sing 7 days a week. But it's also about saying, yes to things that really excite you and that mean something to you, because if you're saying yes just based on income, it might not help you in the long run. It might be a short-term yes. I hope maybe that helps.
Thank you. Other questions? Well, great. We do have some refreshments out in the lobby, but I just want to say what a pleasure it is to get to know you, to admire the way you've thought about your career, the way you're thinking about it, and I know I speak for everyone in wishing you the very best next month in the opening of Romeo and Juliet and everything that comes after. Samantha Hankey, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.